Series. And last week what we did is looked at loneliness. Today what we're looking at is the whole idea of stress. I remember when I was a little kid, my grandpa had a phrase, and the phrase was very simple. It was, let it be. You know, if I would go up there and I was all worked up about something, he would tell me, let it be. Jesus pretty much says the same thing. You know, Jesus says, don't be anxious, don't worry, don't be consumed about those little things of life. Let it be. I remember there's a time, this was back in late, probably November, early December of 2000. So I think 14 years ago. It was Thursday afternoon, late, probably 4:45, 5 o'clock, and I was just looking at like what the next few days entailed for me, and you know, the next day was going to be a funeral. I had just been at this church like 4 or 5 months, and you know, I'd only done like 2 or 3 funerals in my life at this time, and there was just a lot of conflict with various family members, and it was going to be a tough next 12 to 16 hours. I looked at my schedule on Saturday. There was a wedding. There was a wedding rehearsal. Friday night. Just a few hours after the funeral. One of the things as a pastor is just Sunday comes every week. Like it's every 7 days it comes. It's relentless. It's predictable. And I wasn't ready. I had no time to get ready. And on the home front, Amber was pregnant. You guys know Benjamin, many of you do, and she was pregnant with him. She was on this thing called bed rest. You all ever heard of that before? So I was having some duties around the house, and then my grandpa, who is really like my dad, the one that told me, let it be, let it be, let it be, he was in a nursing home, just about 30 minutes from where I was, and he was dying. He ended up dying about 10 or 11 days after that. And I was just thinking about my life at that time, and I was trying to think of a time this week when I was stressed. And there's been times before, there's been times since, but I just remember that day. I can remember that day in my life, just sitting at my desk, looking out the window. There's a courthouse over here, there's a bank over here, there's a funeral home over here, and my office was on the corner of 3rd and Main Street. And I just looked at my to-do list. I looked outside, I looked down, I looked up, and I'm like, God, I need you on this one. I can't do this one. I can't do this one without you. Now, the reason I tell you this story is I'm not asking for sympathy. This is something that happened to me 14 years ago. The reason that I'm telling you this story is because you have a story that's very similar to mine. Some of yours would make mine look like a very easy day. Some of you may be comparable to mine. Some of you may be living in this story right now. This story where there's just there's too much responsibility and not enough time. There's too much going on. There's just not enough resources. You may be in this place right now, and it's not because you're weak. It's not because you've made poor decisions. It's because you're human. Stress is going to be part of life. You take like a 9th or 10th grade biology class, and one of the things that they're going to teach you about is stress. Stress is when a stimulus comes upon an organism, and it's how the organism then reacts to that stimulus. It's part of life. Now, your stress, it's going to look different than the person you're sitting by, the person you're sitting behind, the person you're sitting in front of. Your stress may because, I think a very common one for many of us is, I just don't have enough time. You take kids from point A to point B at work. You just try to do the stuff to survive, and it seems like some days that's about all you're doing. For others, you may have like a conflict. If this is you, you know what I'm talking about. There might be a conflict at work. There might be a conflict at home. There might be a conflict with somebody in your past. And this conflict is putting stress on your life. Maybe some of us just haven't taken the best of care of ourselves. We're tired, we're worn out. When we wake up, we just wish we could sleep a few hours longer. There's some of us that might be facing things like debt, disease, death of a loved one. I would assume in this room there's some people that just don't sleep very well for various reasons. You go to bed at night and the mind is just racing, and it has every reason to be racing. Maybe that's you. Maybe for some of us, we're being bullied. This could be kids. I mean, it happens to kids, but it happens to adults as well. There's somebody that just is getting the best of us. They're manipulating us, they're taking advantage of us, they're exerting power over us. Maybe some of us might have a job that has just unreasonable expectations. So you go to work, and for the next 8 hours, or the next 9 hours, or the next 10 hours, your life, it's tough because there's unreasonable expectations that are placed upon you. And then the bad news is when we clock out, or when we leave, or when we get in our car to go home, or whatever it is, we're unable to leave that totally there. So not only is it like 8 or 9 or 10 hours of responsibility, now it's a whole lot more. Some of us might have parents with unreasonable expectations. Some of us may have kids that don't understand our very reasonable expectations. So you can see, and I think I probably hit everybody once. And if I haven't, you still have stress in your life. It just isn't on this list. Stress is inevitable. It will happen. So avoiding stress is something that's going to be impossible. So I would say this: if you make the aim of your life trying to avoid stress, I would say that you're going to succumb to a different type of stress altogether. And that's really avoiding the life that God is wanting you to live. Just take a guess. Guess what's the most stressful time of year for most of us? Not for all of us, but for most of us. Just take a guess. We're in it right now. It's not a trick question. It's not June right now. It's like, Thanksgiving to New Year's Day, by far, for many of us, is the most stressful time of year. Now, we're in the middle of a series called Christmas in the Movies. Last week, we looked at how the Grinch stole Christmas. And this week, we're going to look at one of America's favorite families. And we're going to see how stress has overcome their family.
What kind of tree displayed at the White House was?
Dad, they're back.
Clark, stop it! I don't want to spend the holidays dead.
Honey, please, I'll do the driving, okay? Will you just take it easy, Ellen? I'm in complete control. Get around this egg timer.
Dad? Dad?
We're all right. Thank God we're all right.
Clark, we're stuck under a truck.
Do you honestly think I don't know that?
Come on, you guys, don't fight.
Oh, for Christ's sake, I didn't do this on purpose.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And forgive my husband. He knows not what he does.
Amen.
Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
Made pretty good time.
Dad, didn't they invent Christmas tree lots so people wouldn't have to drive all the way out to nowhere and waste a whole Saturday?
They invented them, Russ, because people forgot how to have a fun, old-fashioned family Christmas and are satisfied with scrawny, dead, overpriced trees that have no special meaning.
My toes are numb.
You see, kids, this is what our forefathers did.
I can't feel my leg.
They walked out into the woods, they picked out that special tree, and they cut it down with their bare hands.
Mom, I can't feel my hips.
Clark,
Yes, honey?
Audrey's frozen from the waist down.
Oh, that's all part of the experience, honey. There it is. The Griswold family Christmas tree.
Isn't it a little big?
It's not big, it's just full.
Dad, that thing wouldn't fit in our yard.
Not going in our yard, Russ. It's going in our living room. Look at it.
It really is beautiful, Clark.
Something else, huh, Russ?
Yeah, Dad.
Isn't it a beaut, Audrey?
She'll see it later, honey. Her eyes are frozen.
Most enduring traditions of the season are best enjoyed in the warm embrace of kith and kin. This tree is a symbol of the spirit of the Griswold family Christmas.
Dad, did you bring a saw?
All right, so I think a few of us can relate to that. Maybe not to that, but we can relate to that. Like, this is just a stressful time of year. Like, your to-do list, I'm guessing, is probably a little bit longer than what it usually is. Like, there's Christmas parties, there's Christmas shopping, there's Christmas cards, there's coordinating family. Like, seriously, have you ever tried this before? Like, coordinating family, like brothers and sisters and nieces and nephews and grandparents, and being a pastor, like, it's tough to do. And there's wrapping gifts. And I want to say this, like, this sounds like a whole lot of complication and a whole lot of work for a day that's supposed to be set apart, for a day that's supposed to be sacred and holy, a day that we celebrate that Jesus once entered the world, in a day where the invitation still stands for God to enter more deeply into our life. Now, stress happens for a couple reasons. One of them is for reasons that are beyond our control. Now, the second reason that stress is going to happen is for reasons that we, for the most part, do control. Now, I want to look at, first of all, the things that we just don't control. So some of the stress that exists in your life is just beyond your control. You can't change it. There's nothing you can do to change it. All you can do is change your reaction to it. So, for example, if you have an adult child who's making choices, there's a very low probability that you're going to be able to control that child. If you enter into a relationship with somebody and that somebody breaks your heart, you can't control that type of stress. Consequences from your past decisions. We can't control the past anymore. It's already happened. It's something that's there. Many illnesses, sometimes our coworkers, our neighbors, our classmates, our weather. Many of us stress over the weather, but we don't control it. So why stress over it? Then the last one is going to be like the economy. So I want to go back to the verse that Jennifer read a little bit ago from Luke chapter 12. I'm going to start in verse 22. So here Jesus is aware that stress is going to be something that's going to happen. Jesus is well aware of stress. He knows what it is. So Jesus says, that's why I tell you not to worry. Okay, some translations would say don't be anxious, don't fear, don't stress out about everyday life, whether you'll have enough food to eat or clothes to wear, for life is more than food and your body is more than clothing. Now look at the ravens. So here he's intentionally, selected not the most, glorified bird. Look at the ravens. They don't plant or harvest or store food in barns, yet God feeds them. And you are far more valuable to him than any birds. Okay, so let's look at verse 25 here together, okay? Jesus says, can all your worries, can all your anxiety, can all your fear, can all your stress, can any of this stress add a single moment to your life? Now, Jesus here is asking a rhetorical question. And we all know the answer and the response to that rhetorical question. Obviously, it can't. In fact, it can do quite the opposite. One of the ways to live a shorter life is to live as a person who is stressed out, as a person who has let stress overcome us. Then in verse 26, he says, and if worry, if anxiety, if fear, if stress can't accomplish a little thing like that, that's added a moment to your life, then what's the use of worrying, being fearful, being anxious, being stressed out about bigger things? So Jesus here he's actually making a plea. And the plea he's making is like, don't be stressed out over these things. Like, life is too short, to carry around this burden known as stress. Like, if we try to change something that we can't change, all we're doing, it's ironic, we're actually adding to our level of stress. Because we're going to be a failure at that. We can't change something we can't change. Plus, we're spending time and we're spending energy and we're spending resources on something that we'd be better off spending resources doing something else with, which is even going to make us more stressed out. So we can't change some things in our life. But what we can do is change our reaction to those things. We can move from anxiety to peace. We can move from stress to peace. Now, Reinhold Niebuhr, he wrote a very well-known prayer in October of 1943. This prayer is a prayer that many of you know very well. It's a prayer that many of you pray very regularly. This prayer is known as the Serenity Prayer. This was written by this Catholic theologian, and the original version, it goes like this: God, give me the grace to accept with serenity the things that cannot be changed. Give me the courage to change the things which should be changed, and the wisdom to distinguish one from the other. So think about this, this is profound stuff here. He's saying okay, so for the things we can't change, just give me the ability to accept those things and not to be overcome and overtaken and overwhelmed by them. The things that I can change, and we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes, let me be proactive. Let me do what I can do to make things better. And Lord, help me to know the difference then between the two. So my little guy, David, he's 7, and just in the last year or two, he's really started to like football. So his favorite team is the Green Bay Packers. So he loves the Green Bay Packers, and if you're a Green Bay Packers fan, it's a good year to be a Green Bay Packers fan. They're probably the best team in the NFL so far this year. And last week they were playing probably one of the other best teams, the New England Patriots. So David he was glued to the TV set starting at 3:15, and he was pacing back and forth, and the Packers started to win. And then in the second half, the Patriots started to come back. And Tom Brady was driving the Patriots, and they were on the 13-yard line. And if they were going to score this touchdown, they'd just be within one score of the Packers, and it appeared they were getting the momentum. And me and Benjamin and Amber and even Esther was watching the game. Esther's a dog, for those of you who don't know Esther. She's also the second biggest person in our family. But so Esther had 3/4 the couch. I had a third. Amber had a third, and David was pacing around. And David finally he had to sit down, and he's like, I am so nervous right now I could throw up. Now, David cannot change the outcome of this game. He can cheer as hard as he wants. He can pray as hard as he wants. And, there's going to be 22 players in the field that determine the outcome of the game. Now, I think a lot of us are kind of like that sometimes. There's these things that we can't control, and we just let these things overcome us. I remember probably about 3-4 years ago, there's this guy that called me up, and right when he called me up, I knew his voice. I grew up with him. We went to school for 13 years together. We graduated together, and he said he was going to be in Omaha, and he wanted to know if he could stop in and see me. I hadn't seen him for probably 18, 20 years, I'm guessing, at that point. So he came to my office. It was at Faith Westwood at the time, and sat down and we just kind of did some small talk stuff. And finally, I was like, well, what brings you to Omaha? And he's like, well, Craig, I actually came to see you. And then he said something I've only heard probably about 3 or 4 times in my 18 years of doing this. He said, Craig, what I'm about to tell you, you can't tell anybody else, right? And I'm like, well, yes, I'm bound to confidentiality. Anything that you say to me has to stay in this room. And I was thinking, what is going on here? I didn't know if he killed somebody, if he stole something, and he told me a story. It was a very long, complicated story. It happened about 10 years before he saw me. And he actually did kill somebody. He killed somebody's hopes. He actually did steal something. He stole the dreams from a number of people. Now I looked at him, and what I saw was stress. What I saw was his past overcoming his future. He could not do a darn thing about it to change this. It happened. Unfortunately, it happened, and there was carnage all over the place. But the one thing that he could do, and the one thing that he has to do, is he has to change his reaction to this thing that he can no longer change. He can't let this defeat him. He can't let this define him. He has to figure out some way to move on. And I think that's the story for a lot of us. I mean, your story isn't nearly as overwhelming and probably as maybe it is, I don't know. But I think that many of us deal with things that we just can't change. Like, maybe we have a neighbor and this neighbor and us just don't get along. We're not going to move, they're not going to move, we're not going to change this neighbor, so what do we get to do? We get to change our reaction to this neighbor. So the stress diminishes in our life. We may have a job that this job is just killing us. We get there in the morning and it's tough. We feel like we're just getting by. We feel like we're just going through the motions. And, probably right now you can't do much about that. Long term, certainly you can. But, tomorrow's Monday and we go back to work. So we can't change, the surroundings tomorrow morning, but we can change our reaction to what we're doing. And that one little shift in attitude can make a profound difference. Maybe there's like some type of debt that we have. Like, we owe people money and it wears on us. And, whether it's 3 years before we get out of debt or 10 years before we get out of debt, whatever it is. But I want to let you know that there's people that are in debt that can live lives of joy and contentment. We made a mistake. We spent more than we had. Maybe we didn't make a mistake. Maybe we just kind of overextended or whatever. But we can't let this ruin all areas of our life. Let's get it paid down. Let's get it paid off. And, let's live as people who aren't stressed out about something that we can't change. I was thinking for this guy I grew up with, for him, what I specifically prayed was that failure is overcome by a future, that grace overcomes guilt, that hope replaces self-hate, and that peace replaces his past. So I want us to think about those things in our life that we can't change. And what I want to pray for all of us is that we can experience peace, that the stress will go away because we're going to change the way that we react to the things that we can't change. Now, there are some things that we can control. Now, there's many things that we can. There's some things that we can't. There's many things that we can. Now, one of the things I think that stresses many of us out this type of year is this thing called perfectionism. And even if you don't consider yourself a perfectionist, I think that this is something that pretty much all of us deal with at least some of the time. We want our house to be perfect when the guests come over. We want to pick the perfect presents for our kids. We want our schedule to be perfect. We want our family relationships to be perfect. We just don't want to, celebrate this time with our family. We want to celebrate good time with family. I don't know if your family is anything like mine. I mean, my family is composed of about 30 human beings. And the Norwegians are going to invade, Emily and 173rd Street on December 27th. And if you just hit a little wall, I mean, you're going to see a bunch of people spend time together, and some of them don't always get along the best. Now, Clark Griswold, what did he do? He walked through a bunch of snow to get the perfect Christmas tree. Now, if you watch the rest of the movie, you know that the Christmas tree is far from perfect. But when you were watching that, you actually thought that he was crazy, didn't you? Here's this guy walking through this snow to get this tree. This man has absolutely no clue what he's doing. Yet I would submit that many of us walk through deep snow to get to imperfect Christmas trees all the time. I think that there's some of us here that spend an inordinate amount of time and money selecting and purchasing the right clothes so we look the best that we can look. I think that there's some of us who spend an inordinate amount of time and energy trying to control people around us so they perfectly act and behave how we want them to act and behave. I think there's some of us that are trying to collect enough money. We're walking through the snow, and if we get enough of this money, we're finally going to have security. But in the end, money doesn't buy you security. There's others of us that are trying to impress our supervisors and our customers. There's some of us who are trying to impress our coaches and our teachers. Now, with perfectionism, what we do is we walk through these piles of deep snow in search of the unattainable. Now, we might get close. Moses, he got close. Moses made it to the top of Mount Pisgah. He could see the promised land. But he died on top of the mountain, and Joshua was the one that had to lead him across. And I think some of us, we may get so close, but we're going to kill ourselves in the process. So what I want us to think about is I want you to give yourself a gift this Christmas. It's not going to cost you a penny. I want you to give yourself a gift this Christmas, and the gift is the gift of self-compassion. The gift is the gift of self-love. Now, Socrates was brilliant when he said that we should know ourselves and we should understand ourselves. But Jesus was absolutely profound when he said that we should love ourselves. It's not just enough to know, it's not just enough to understand. We have to love ourselves as well. Now, trying to attain the impossible, this is perfectionism. Trying to attain perfectionism is not loving ourselves. All it is doing is setting us up for repeated failure after failure after failure. Loving yourself, simply what it means is learning to trust oneself, learning to respect oneself, learning to treat ourselves with kindness and grace. Now, a perfectionist is generally going to try to win the approval of another person. Perfectionists aren't born, perfectionists are raised. Perfectionists are raised that if your grades are good enough, if I do well enough in this sport, if I follow these rules to a T, then I'm going to earn somebody's love. That's what perfectionism says. Now, perfectionists, they would say, if I'm perfect, or at least if I come off as perfect, then people are going to love me. Now, healthy growth is going to be self-focused. Healthy growth says, this is for me. Perfectionism, on the other hand, says, this is to impress somebody else. Now, perfectionism is a self-destructive and an addictive belief system. And the primary thought is like this. If I look perfectly, if I live perfectly, if I act perfectly, if I do the right things in my life, then I'm going to avoid stress, I'm going to avoid pain, and I'm going to minimize these things in my life. But the problem is that perfectionism is simply unattainable. Perfectionism is like this, like ugh. Like I looked at the closet this morning and none of this stuff fits. And because this stuff doesn't fit, I'm not accepted, I'm not loved, I don't meet up to somebody else's expectations. Where self-growth would say, I'm going to do this for me. I'm going to, lose some weight, I'm going to feel better for me. I'm not going to let the scale, I'm not going to let the measuring tape, define who I am, because I know that I'm loved by God and I know that I'm worthy to be loved by others. Now, I want you to think about something. A moment of self-compassion is going to change your entire day. It will. Like a moment of grace that you give to yourself, it will change your day. So for example, like this Christmas, if your Christmas cards don't get out, guess what? You're going to be okay. You're not the only person to not send out a Christmas card to everybody you've ever known. If you don't get to every party, that's okay too. If you don't get to see all your family, or when you do see your family, things aren't perfect, that doesn't make you bad. It makes you human. When we can replace this in a day, it will change our day. Now, a string of these moments of self-compassion, they will change our life. They'll really do that. When we can replace perfectionism and its related need for approval, we will go from self-compassion and grace that leads us down this path of peace and abundance. Now, I'm just going to give us this little quick formula to close this morning. And when stress comes your way, and many of us are here now, for many of us it's going to come, but when stress comes our way, the first thing that we do is we pause, stop, take a break, be still. You don't have to keep doing what you can take a break for a second, okay? It's going to look different for different people. Maybe you're at work and you just have to get up and just get away from that computer screen for 5 minutes. You're going to come back as different. Maybe for some of us, we just have to go around the block and take a walk. Maybe for some of us, we have to put our phones down for a few hours and just distance ourselves from the world. And guess what? The world is going to be fine without you. When you re-enter the world that way, it's going to be the same and you're going to be different, and that's really cool. Last night we were driving home, Amber and David and I were, and I looked down and there's this red light on my dashboard, and I was out of gas. Like, it was on empty, it was below empty, and I finally got to a gas station. I pulled in and I put 18.06 gallons of gas in an 18-gallon tank, in case you're wondering. Now, you guys think that that's like crazy to like do that, and I didn't do it on purpose, but when my grandpa, he used to, like, when it got to like half, he'd go fill it up. Some of us do it like at a third or a quarter, or we wait till it's totally empty. But like for a car, that's like totally normal. But what about like when Stephanie runs out of gas? What does she do? Or when Freddie runs out of gas, what does he do? We just try to keep. And Jesus did not come to the world so that we can be running on empty all the time. The psalmist, he simply says, "Be still. Be still and know that I'm God." Jesus says, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I'll give you rest for your soul." Now, the second thing we do, we pause, we pray. Like, I've prayed 1,000 prayers. I prayed more than that. There's never been a single prayer that I've ever regretted. There's never been a time where I've haven't felt better after praying. There may be a few times that it was kind of neutral, but almost every time, it's been a good experience. I've never felt worse after praying than before praying. God does something in us when we pray. It can be simple. I mean, like, say if you're having a tough day at the office and you got a call from the school, you just pause, you pray. It's like, God, today is just a lot. Like, this work stuff, it's getting to me, and now I got to go to the school, and I don't know how all this stuff is going to get done. And Lord, I ask for your grace, and I ask for your wisdom, and I ask for your mercy. And God, just guide me on the path I need to take, and help me to find people that will help me. And Lord, I ask for your peace right now. Amen. That's all it is. Like, you don't have to be a theologian, you don't have to be a pastor, you don't have to be a scholar. We're disciples. We're children of God. God wants to hear from us. Paul says in Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 and 7, "Don't be anxious, don't be worried, don't be stressed out about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, let your wishes be known to God." Now, the third is going to be to prioritize. We've paused, we've prayed, now we prioritize. And here's what's going to happen in your life. When we make our priorities, we get to do the things that we want to do. We get to be the people that we want to be. We get to go the places that we want to go. When other people make our priorities for us, and if we're not making our priorities for us, other people are going to fill those gaps in, and all of a sudden, what happens when other people make our priorities for us? Our lives are full of stress. So I would just say, take a few minutes and sit down and, like, who is important to you? Who? What is that person's name? What is it? I mean, what could you imagine not doing, in the next few days, in the next week, in the next month, in the next year? Just write those things down on a simple little list. Those are your priorities. At the end of the passage that Jennifer read in Luke chapter 12, verse 31, Jesus says, "But seek his kingdom, and all these things will be given to you." Now, the fourth thing is going to be progress, not perfection. So we've paused, we've prayed, we've prioritized, and now we're making progress. Now, don't think about the last step. Don't think about what perfection looks. Think about the next step, because that's the only step that you can't take. That's the only step that you can take. You can't be transported from here to the finish line. We have to take the next step, and we take the next step after that. So think about not perfection, but think about progress. In the next day, in the next week, by the end of the year, in 2015, what does progress look like for you? And finally, persevere. So we've paused, we've prayed, we've prioritized, we've made progress, and now we're persevering. And the whole thing about perseverance is this: you're going to have setbacks, you're going to have challenges, you're going to have obstacles, you're going to have difficulties. What perseverance is the willingness to get up when you're knocked down. Perseverance is being willing to take the next step, even though it appears that's going to be really challenging. So perseverance says, okay, I'm going to pause again, I'm going to pray again, I'm going to prioritize, reprioritize if necessary, then I'm going to make some more progress until I get to where I feel God is leading me to go. So Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, "Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes upon Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith." So let us pray.